Relations between the United States and Canada have rarely felt this cold. For decades, the two neighbors shared the world's longest peaceful border. They traded goods, ideas, and even hockey players. But now, tensions are rising fast. The reasons are complex, but recent events have pushed both countries into a new era of rivalry. At the heart of the current storm are big personalities and bigger issues. Economic worries are mixing with political drama. Trade, energy, and even questions of sovereignty are on the table. Old agreements are being questioned. New threats are being made. Both sides are bracing for a fight that could reshape North America. The mood changed almost overnight. It started with a high-profile meeting between Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister, and Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner in the US. What was supposed to be a routine discussion turned into a showdown that set off alarms in Ottawa and Washington. Suddenly, Canadians are asking, "Can we trust our southern neighbor?" Americans are wondering, "Is Canada still on our side?" The answers for now are far from clear. Mark Carney, a former central banker, is no stranger to high-stakes negotiations. But nothing prepared him for his recent encounter with Donald Trump. Behind closed doors in Washington, both leaders met with their top advisors. It was meant to be friendly, a chance to reaffirm ties and talk trade. Instead, it became a turning point. Trump arrived with demands, pushing for new tariffs on Canadian steel and timber. He even questioned long-standing energy deals. Carney stood his ground, refusing the tariffs and calling Trump's comments unacceptable. The Canadian team left frustrated, but determined to respond. As news leaked, markets reacted and politicians scrambled to control the narrative. Canadian media painted Carney as a defender of national pride. In the US, Trump supporters cheered his tough stance. But the real story was just beginning. Publicly, both sides tried to keep things calm, smiles, handshakes, and talk of shared values. But behind closed doors, the mood was tense. Leaked memos revealed the US had issued threats. Trump warned of harsher penalties, possibly targeting Canadian auto exports and agriculture. His team even floated reviewing the border agreement and hinted at new restrictions. Canadian officials were shocked by the tone, expecting tough talk, not outright hostility. The contrast between public smiles and private reality could not have been sharper. The stakes had never been higher. Canada did not take the US threats lightly. Within days, Carney gave a fiery speech in Ottawa. He called the US demands an attack on Canadian sovereignty. He promised that Canada would not be bullied. "We will defend our interests, whatever it takes," he said, to loud applause in Parliament. Behind the scenes, Canada began to prepare for retaliation. Officials drew up lists of US products that could face new tariffs. They discussed suspending energy exports to certain US states. There was even talk of reviewing military cooperation, a move that would have been unthinkable just months ago. The Canadian government also reached out to allies in Europe and Asia. They began urgent talks to reroute exports and secure new markets. "We're not alone," Carney told reporters. "Canada has friends around the world, and we will find new partners if necessary." The message was clear. Canada would not back down. If the US wanted a trade war, Ottawa was ready to fight back, hard. Inside Canada's parliament, the mood was anything but united. Carney's tough stance won praise from many, but not everyone agreed on the best way forward. The Conservative opposition called for immediate retaliation. They wanted tariffs on US goods and a freeze on cross-border energy deals. "We must show strength," their leader declared. Progressive parties, on the other hand, urged caution. They warned that a trade war could hurt Canadian workers and families. Some MPs pushed for more diplomacy, hoping to find common ground with Washington. Others called for bold new investments in Canadian industries to reduce dependence on the US. Regional divisions also surfaced. Western provinces, heavily dependent on US markets, worried about the impact of new barriers. Quebec and Atlantic Canada, meanwhile, saw an opportunity to expand trade with Europe and Africa. The debate was heated, with no easy answers in sight. Despite the divisions, one thing was clear. Parliament was preparing for a long fight. Whatever Canada decided to do next, it would shape the country's future for years to come. In Washington, the mood was just as tense. Trump and his allies blamed Canada for the breakdown in talks. "They're taking advantage of us," Trump said at a rally. US media echoed the message, accusing Canada of unfair trade practices and weak border controls. The US administration began a formal review of all agreements with Canada. They threatened to suspend key trade deals if Ottawa did not meet their demands. New tariffs on Canadian cars and dairy products were announced, sending shockwaves through Canadian industries. American business leaders were divided. Some supported Trump's tough approach, hoping for better deals. Others warned that a trade war could hurt US jobs and raise prices for consumers. But the political momentum was clear. Washington was not backing down. The US also stepped up pressure on Canada at the United Nations and in other international forums. They argued that Canada was not living up to its commitments. The gloves were off, and both sides were digging in for a long battle. Facing US pressure, Canada turned outward. Carney's government launched a diplomatic blitz, sending ministers to Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The goal: to build new trade partnerships and reduce dependence on the US market. Canada also began collecting evidence of US trade violations. Officials prepared legal cases for the World Trade Organization and other bodies. "We will defend our rights under international law," said Canada's trade minister. The government hoped that global support would strengthen its hand. Talks with the European Union, Japan, and India moved quickly. Canadian companies started to sign new export contracts. Ports in Vancouver and Halifax expanded capacity, preparing to handle more trade with Asia and Europe. "We're open for business," Carney declared. The strategy was risky, but necessary. Canada knew it could not replace the US market overnight. But by moving fast, Ottawa hoped to show Washington that it had other options and that it would not be pushed around. The US-Canada showdown is about more than tariffs and trade deals. It is a test of power, identity, and the future of North America. Both countries are rethinking old alliances and searching for new paths forward. For Canada, the crisis is a chance to become more independent. Nationalizing key industries is now on the table. So is rerouting oil and gas exports through new pipelines and ports, bypassing the US entirely. These moves could make Canada stronger, but also more isolated. For the US, the stakes are just as high. Losing Canada as a close ally would weaken America's position in the world. It could also hurt US businesses and consumers, especially if the trade war drags on. Both sides risk long-term damage if they cannot find a way to compromise. The next few months will be crucial. Every decision, every speech, every tariff, every new deal could change the shape of North America. The world is watching, and the outcome is far from certain.